Hey, man.
Bro, what is
Hey, how
up,
you
dude?
doing? Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm
Th-
good, man. How about you?
Good. Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Dude, I am so excited, man. It has been absolutely awesome. Honestly, just having the opportunity of any of these, but being able to talk to cats like yourself and involved in so much and so much awesome hardcore. It's a pleasure, man. Pleasure's mine. Thank you
So,
so much.
yeah, thanks. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
All
Um,
right, too. So, I wanted to kind of dig into, like your story. You kind of, given out where earlier, interests kind of devolve into, you playing into all of the awesome bands that you've been a part of over the years. So, as far as early on, whether it was just parents, friends, relatives that were introducing you to music, what was something, that really started catching your own ear, maybe even before aggressive music, where you started developing your own interests?
well, I would say that, so basically, my dad was born in the 30s. He was born in Spain, and he was born before, like, a couple months before the Spanish Civil War kicked off. So basically, he grew up in a in a military dictatorship, so he didn't really have access to music the same way that someone that was not in a totalitarian dictatorship grew up. So he didn't necessarily get the I would say his interest in music. He was into like classical music and stuff, but my mom was way into, she loved the Doors. She saw the Doors in Mexico City in like 1968 or 69 or
Dang.
whatever. Like she loved the Doors. She loved all types of music. Like when I was little, she liked Earth, Wind and Fire. She liked, she liked a lot of like Spanish flamenco music, like Los Chonguitos, groups like that. So she was into a lot of music like that. So she was basically, I think she definitely helped me to, I guess have somewhat of an interest in music. Also, my sister, I have an older sister who she was into a lot of like rock music. Like she liked Van Halen and The Who, and uh, she also liked groups like The Cure and Psychedelic Furs and stuff like. So she was into all,
Okay.
yeah, she was into all types of stuff like that. So I think basically I remember both of them uh, listen to music and kind of like that. I think in a way kind of sparked my interest a little bit. When I was younger, I also liked, so I was like way into kind of like the start, like early kind of like rap music stuff. Like I liked going to, I went to see all the, like breaking movies and Beat Street and things like that. And it was like, I think that was kind of, yeah, that was something that was definitely, on my radar because like kids around me were into it or whatever. And it's like,
Okay.
I kind of was into that. I was into like Prince, went to go see Purple Rain with my mom and stuff, like in the theater and
Whoa.
stuff. And I mean, it's like like, yeah, there was all kinds of music like that that was happening or whatever that I was into. It basically, when I think about it, because like some of the first like tapes records I got were like the Raising Hell by Run DMC,
Oh,
License
sick.
Ill by the Beastie Boys, things like that. So those were kind of like some of my first interests, and then I kind of like started liking some, more like, I guess, I got into like the first Guns N' Roses album when it came out, and then when like Metallica, things like that. Like Metallica kind of like really was like the first, I guess, more aggressive, like heavier music that I loved, and like they were like my favorite band or whatever and all that, and they were the first band that I saw live, and actually them wearing shirts of like punk bands or whatever. It was like, oh, I need to check that shit out. I need to check the Misfits out. I need to check out things like that. And so,
Oh,
I
man.
bought a Misfits, like I bought Walk Among Us by the Misfits because of that. And that kind of like, that was like yeah, like that basically got me interested in more punk. And I started skateboarding kind of around that time too. So, Thrasher magazine totally opened my eyes to a lot of shit. Like it, like Youth of Today, uh, the Cro-Mags, Poison Idea, like bands like that or whatever. It's like was reading about that, so I was like, oh shit, I need to check that out, whatever, you know. So it was you know a lot of things like that. But I would say you know my trajectory or you know definitely is probably yeah because of my mom, my sister, like their love of rock music or you know kind of like more some more kind of alternative music or whatever too, you know, in my sister's
Sure.
case. So that definitely opened my eyes to that.
Well, with you mentioning Metallica, was that something as well that was like an influence from your sister, or was that something that you
No, that
saw
was I
somebody
came
wearing a
on.
T-shirt?
Yeah, no, I can't. You know, and that's what I've been trying to remember how I even came on Metallica. If it was just, I think it was just like they were like popular at the, you know,
Yeah,
I mean, they were popular,
sure.
not like the same level they are now or whatever.
Yeah.
This was like 80s underground popular or whatever. But it's like you would see kids wearing Metallica shirts. I'm like, oh, that looks pretty ill or whatever. I want to check that out. Um, and yeah, it just kind of like, yeah, because yeah, like honestly, I don't remember exactly what sparked my, you know, if it was just kind of like, okay, well, these bands are, you know, like Guns N' Roses is more like rock and roll or whatever, but this is kind of more metal. And, you know, like I guess, you know, Iron Maiden too, like things that in then Slayer, you know, what I mean, it kind of, yeah, it
Yeah.
all kind of just started to like, I guess, snowball from that or whatever, you know, like more thrash shit, and then, you know, getting more into hardcore, and then, you know, like kind of death metal shit, like, cause late 80s death metal or whatever that was starting to pop off, and that kind of like, that really got my attention to like all the earache stuff, especially
Oh
was,
yeah.
and you know, I mean that because that was coming from the hardcore scene, so I guess that you know that tied in together that way. But yeah, I mean, yeah, all that shit that kind of just kind of brought me through into you know into like yeah, like I know I'm rambling here or whatever, but I think a
No,
lot
no,
of
no.
it, yeah, I
Totally.
mean, I think a lot of it is just like when I started checking out like the Misfits and like skateboarding and shit, then I'm like, okay, well, there's stuff that's happening around me too, you know, and I met other kids that skated that were into punk and whatever, and it's like, oh, there's shows happening. Let's go check out these bands and see what's going on. And you know, yeah, it all kind of just went from there.
You mentioned the early interest in hip hop, and that's
Yeah,
something as far as myself, being a drummer as well,
yeah.
and within production and beats, was that something where you were taking on playing drums, around these times of being into hip hop, or was it kind of something where listening to hip hop, you got an ear for beats through that, or how did
I
that go
think,
about?
yeah, no, I mean, I think it definitely. I think my interest in that definitely sparked my wanting to play and kind of like that feeling like, you know, because it's like to me having the rhythm of like the drums or whatever, it's like that's what makes this shit happen or whatever. That's what makes me, you know, I mean, yeah, there is music that I like that doesn't have drums in it or whatever,
Sure.
like a lot of flamenco music, but flamenco music also has like the way they play, it's like it's you
Rhythmic.
know yeah, right, it's very rhythmic, and it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you know the golpe they hit or whatever, it's like when they're playing. So to me it's kind of like that's like the way the world works, the way like it's the rhythm of life, you know, it's like that. So I mean that's so yeah, it's like the like drums kind of that definitely it all fits in to all of that or whatever. But yeah, I mean definitely I would say my I think I got the feeling for like hip hop shit because of that, and that also sparked my wanting to play drums or whatever.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so I mean picking up drums too, it's like because I definitely didn't have money to be, and I kind of just stumbled on playing drums too because it's like I
Oh,
wanted
really?
to, yeah, because I wanted to be in a band, and I'm like, you know, like everyone's that I had friends that played other instruments or whatever. I'm like, well, fuck it, I'll do this, not thinking about it's fucking expensive to play drums. And so, like, for a long time, I was borrowing shit from a whole bunch of people that are nice enough to let me borrow it because I didn't have, you know, I mean, it's like you don't think about that shit.
No.
Like, you're just like, oh, this is fun or whatever. Like, oh, but I have to buy every fucking,
Maintain.
yeah, every piece, also maintain, like, you know. And I mean, that's the thing, is like I think I've always come from it where I think there's people that kind of like, oh, I need this to sound the best, like totally amazing and shit. And I've always been like, hey, that works if it works. Hey, it's like if this is not falling apart or whatever, or if this is you know, keeping up, then then that, you know, fuck it, that works.
Work.
You know.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you know. And it's just like touring with punk bands and shit, there's a lot of times I've had to borrow stuff that, you know, it's just like, this is what you got, and
Yeah.
you make it happen, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what's always been important to me, or whatever. Or like, you know, like it's like the feeling, the energy, the, you know, shit like that.
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah,
know.
for sure. I mean, within getting that first kit, you know, and I've touched on this a lot too, you know, from being in that same situation, you know, not having, you know, parents, we were fine, but, you know, by no means were we rich, or
Right.
were we, you know, somebody who I was getting cymbals all the time, or you don't think of that stuff, man.
Right.
It's like, you know, you look around and, you know, like, oh, nobody else is playing drums. Maybe I'll pick those up. There's a reason why they're not.
Right. Yeah. No, no. I mean,
I don't want to play all that.
yeah,
Load out.
yeah, well, yeah, setting it up, like, and that's the thing, is like, as I've gotten older or whatever, it's like, yeah, when I was like, younger, it's like, oh shit, yeah, I can fucking take all 20 bags of shit, like up and down a bunch of stairs and all this stuff. And it's like, now that I'm older, I'm like, you know, well, I mean, yeah, I still fucking do it, but I'm like, it's definitely more of a pain in the ass, right?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
but yeah, you definitely don't think about all the shit that kind of comes with that, you know. So yeah.
Well, what about that first kit? So, you know, tell us about that, and how you know, you came about getting it, what kind it was.
Well, so the first, like, I was playing, the first bands I played in, it was all borrowed shit, and I don't even like, it was like a no name whatever kit. I honestly don't even remember the name of it, because it's like,
Okay.
you know, because it was a long ass time ago, and also it's like, it wasn't like a known kit. The first one that I got that was a nicer one, that my mom, you know, saved up money and helped me out with or whatever, is I got a Mapex Mars kit that I wore, that I played that for years, like pretty much all through the most of the 90s or whatever, like in all the, like when I was in those Crudos and Charles Bronson and MK Ultra, I played that kit throughout it or whatever. And that, you know, it was a good, because even though Mapex though was like, it was a newer company at the time or whatever, it's like, it sounded good. And it was yeah, it, like, I know my friend Brian, he got a newer Mapex kit that's super nice. You know, it's like this, like it was, you know. So I mean, it's like they're still making shit, like, as far as I know or whatever. But it definitely lasted, like, you know, it had, I liked it because it was, the drum sizes were bigger, like the kick drum was big, the tom sizes were bigger, and that was, you know, like in the 80s and like pretty much like early to mid 90s or whatever, they were making bigger size toms or whatever, and that's kind of like my style, like what I want, like. And you know, now it's like everything's like super little. You know, it's like you get it, and it's kind of, I mean, that's cool, but it's also like, I like to have it sound like fucking, you know, like kind of thundering, like heavy kind of sounding or whatever. So, you know, it yeah, I liked it because of that. It definitely, you know, and it, you know, it lasted, it held up for a while. I still have the shells. I need to, you know, probably try and like fuck around with it and try and put it back together. You know, like all the hardware pieces kind of started to fall apart after years of like inactivity and not really keeping up with taking care of it. But yeah, I still do have it. So
man, now at one point, did you have, what was the red kit? Was it
that's it?
Like a,
yeah.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I was thinking maybe it was like a pearl or something. I recently got like a 90s Premiere kit, and it had like the lugs that go all the way around the shell and everything. Yeah. And I was like, man, is that okay, so that was the Mapex
that was a Mapex kit. Yep.
Dang,
and again, it's like, and so Mapex is what, like, owned by Gibson, or, you know, it's like it was owned by some guitar company or whatever. And that was like, when I got that, it was kind of a newer thing, so it wasn't as expensive as some of, you know, I mean, it was not, especially at the time and having no money, it was not cheap,
Not
but
cheap.
it wasn't as expensive as like some of the Tama and Pearl and Yamaha, you know, kits or whatever that are available. So
I know the Mars still get made too.
yeah,
If not right now, within the last like few years, because I've seen some newer ones that come out, and I mean they're standing, you know, the test of time. So for sure, you know, that's sick, man. I love it.
well, no, I'm saying I think like I mean the shells I think are still good. I mean they've been in, like so. I'm an asshole and left them at my parents' house or whatever, so they're taking up room in a corner of their house. But I think the shells are still good. I need to actually get them out and try and fuck with them and make them work again. But we'll see.
Now, was there something after that Mapex kit that you ended up, you know, taking out and using for quite a while? Or
So I had that and I toured with that and I used that for a long time. I got just like a Tama like Rockstar kit that for like, you know, like a cheaper, and well at the time I got it basically just to tour with or whatever, so I wouldn't have to, you know, like I didn't really differentiate between the two when I was younger, and just was like, hey, this is what I'm recording and touring with and playing shows and playing at home and whatever, because I didn't, you know, again, didn't have the money to buy another one. But yeah, I got I had a little bit of money, so I bought like a Rockstar kit that I still have too, and I practice on that at home now.
dang, okay.
And then I ended up getting in, I want to say in the shit, now I don't remember what it was. It was like sometime in the 2000s. I got, I don't know if you've heard this band, The Killer, who are from here.
Chicago. Oh,
Yeah, from Chicago. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so Tim, their drummer, he worked for a company called Bison, who were like a local company that made custom kits. He was working there. He made his own kit, and it's an amazing kit. And I bought that off of him or whatever. So I have that. So yeah. So I play that. I play that now. Like I don't practice it with it, but I play it for shows and recording or whatever if I have to and shit. So yeah, that's amazing. Like he like, because he made that to his own specifications and everything. Like big tom, big rack tom, big foot tom, big kick drum or whatever. It is, yeah, it's super nice. And so yeah,
Man.
so that's what I play now or whatever. But yeah, it for a long time it was just kind of like, okay, this is what I got, you know, like like that Rockstar kit was, you know, it's cool, but it's, you know, it's not the same as that Bison kit or whatever. So, you know, but
that's so sick, man. That's awesome.
yeah,
It's funny though, because you mentioned the Mars and you mentioned even the Time of Rockstar. Like if you look right now, there are different bands, even recently, like different cats that I've interviewed that are drummers that are solidly touring on like a Rockstar.
yeah.
Those things hold up. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a
exactly,
reason
right.
that like they're as, you know, prominent or relevant as, you know, as they were. They're a big, beefy, sturdy kit. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna last you.
yeah. No, I mean it's lasted. I was like, now it's been at least 20, like shit, 22, 23 years or whatever, and it's fine. And like, yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. It's like if you take care of it and you actually like, you know, again, if this is the kit that I'm using or whatever, you make it work, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah, no, but it's held up.
So what about local music shops to you, whether they were record shops or, you know, did you have anybody that was kind of like a local hero, you know, as far as like, hey, I'm kind of looking for this. I've been listening to this, you know, do you have any ideas? Anybody that was putting you up onto stuff as far as that music shops at all?
So, you know, we moved around a lot. We ended up in a town called G.O.Y.L, which is about an hour outside of Chicago, which is a college town. It's where Northern Illinois University is. And basically there was, because of the college, there was people there like that would put on shows, that would put on like, you know, there was concerts that would roll through and stuff. Like because of the college, I think that helped a lot of culture to kind of like happen there, because there were so many people that are coming and trying to do things and all that. There basically was there was two record shops when I was growing up that used to get like pretty awesome shit or whatever. They would get basically like there was one called Record Revolution and another place called Apple Tree, and I got like some really like stuff that you wouldn't expect to find in a small college town, basically like in Apple Tree. They had an import section, and I got, you know, like I would read about bands in Maximum Rock and Roll, and they would have like you know, I got like the first Negocioni album, which is like this older Italian hardcore band, the second Amoebics album, like Puss More Thrash Till Death, like shit like that. So it was cool because it's like a lot of stuff where it wasn't super easy to, you know, like you weren't going to just go into a record shop and find that shit.
Yeah, right.
And it was cheap too because no one was buying it, because no one cared about it, because at the time, like, you know, as much as like people, like I guess especially with the advent of the internet, like everyone is like, oh, you know, I know everything about everything that's happening all over the world. At the time, a lot of people were just like, I only care about what's, you know, like my friends are in these bands, or like I only care about what's happening in the USA and shit. So it was like, it was cool to be able to find like, oh shit, this is ill. This is like, this is good music or whatever, that's like from half a world away that you know you don't know shit about or whatever. Like you're not gonna be able to see, like at that time, like Negocioni was still around, but Amoebics had broken up or whatever. So it's not like you're like gonna see him live or whatever.
Yeah.
But so a Record Revolution, I found a lot of cool shit too. It's because there's this dude Dan, him and this other guy Greg, they did a fanzine called This Fanzine, and they used to put on shows. So like, you know, I saw Naked Ray Gun and Life Sentence and like they would get like Chicago bands to come play, or, you know, things like that, like the Digits, who are from Central Illinois. Who else? Fucking the Defoliants, who chucked their bass player. He ended up recording Charles Bronson and Los Crudos, and he, you know, he played guitar for No Empathy, and, you know, I mean, he's like a Chicago scene stalwart or whatever. You know, he's been around like since like whatever, the early 80s and shit, you know, like, I mean, just doing shit. Like he did sound for like Minor Threat and stuff like that. So I mean, he's been around, but that was cool because they were like one of the first punk bands I saw and shit. But like to have it still, yeah, like be like, oh shit, you know, the dude from the Defoliants is recording stuff in his house, and so like we're gonna go record there and stuff like that. It was cool, you know. I mean, but to go back to what I was saying, Dan and Greg, Dan worked at a Record Revolution, and so he would like, you know, like point things out or whatever. He made sure that they got like not only like Maximum Rock and Roll and Flipside, which were like the big fanzines at the time, but he would get, you know, like smaller fanzines and shit. And I love fanzines, so I just like would pick, you know, especially at the time, because it's kind of like, that was when you think about the way people got information, it was kind of through shit like that. Whereas now it's like the internet more, right, you know. But it's like at the time, it's like, oh, I'm gonna read these interviews with these fans, or, you know, oh, this is happening, or this record came out, or whatever. You would get it through that. So it's like he would make sure all that shit happened. I got like, you know, he would just, they would have like all the new like punk shit that you wanted to check out or whatever, you would get it, stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, there was definitely I would say that those dudes kind of helped. Like, and I've only met, like I met Dan, I saw him actually because he's an artist. I saw him at a street fair, just ran into him, and like we were talking, and I saw his name. I'm like, hey, did you used to live in DeKalb and do a fancy called This? And he's like, yeah. And so we started talking or whatever. Yeah, which was, yeah, super fucking random. Like a good, like, I mean, that was like, I wasn't expecting that or whatever, but I'm like, oh shit, man. Like I'm like, you don't remember me, I was a little kid or whatever, but it's like, you turned me on a bunch of cool shit. I love this. I love the shows you put on, stuff like that. It definitely, yeah. And he was like, oh man, that's awesome. And it's like for as small as DeKalb is, it is kind of like strangely, like it has these weird, like you just meet people, they're like, oh yeah, I went to NIU or whatever. It's like they have like, it feels, even though this is the gigantic city, Chicago, and the surrounding areas or whatever, it's like it still feels kind of like a small world sometimes when it comes to certain things, because it's like I was not expecting to kind of just randomly run into that dude or whatever. And so I talked to him for a minute and it was cool, and he's still cool and doing interesting shit. And, you know, I mean, it's good to see stuff like that. So, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even all those years later too, and still, you know, kind of keeping, you know, in the arts perspective, like it kind of sucks nowadays with like zines, just because, like you say, you know, everything is so accessible. And when those things were, you know, were really kind of in their peak, that was where you would sit and, you know, it was like you were finding out of bands or like different, you know, things that were going on. And now it's just, you know, everything on the internet.
Well, I mean, I think
there's from it a little bit.
Yeah, there's definitely cool zines still happening or whatever. I mean, there's still things like
totally.
People are still doing shit with print, and maybe it is kind of an older perspective or whatever, but it's like I appreciate that because I like having, I love the internet. It's like the immediacy of it, that's great, but I also like to hold things in my hand and like be able to kind of like look back on it and be like, or actually see some of the creativity that comes with, you know, because now it's like everything's done through the scope of well, you know, through corporations that own these platforms that we do things through or whatever. But it's like it was always cool to see in zines, like that's awesome the way they laid that out with cut and paste and, you know, like shit like that. Like to me, it's like that's stuff that it gets lost with the, I guess, in the internet or whatever. It's like we kind of lose some shit like that. So, you know.
I agree. And I think there's also too, you know, where it's like with the internet, there's so much that's going on to where like when you have, you know, this, like you mentioned, you know, the kind of physicality, or like with myself with like having movies or having records, you know, like as far as music fans too. And always, you know, like having the articles and reading about a band's new record that isn't out yet, and kind of being able to go back maybe a couple years later and look and like remember that excitement of like, whoa, this is the fastest song they've ever written. They said it right here. You know, it's like
right. Yeah. No, and I mean, I think it also it kind of the thing is that like it, you know, to go back to what I was saying, it's like we kind of lose. Yes, we have more convenience or whatever, but it's then you lose certain other things or whatever that used to just be kind of part and parcel of making music or making art or making whatever. But I also, it's like I like to be able to be like if I just put everything out as like an MP3 or put it out as whatever, it's going to go in one out in one ear and out the other. When I was younger, because again, to go back, not having that much money or whatever, it's like you bought something and you fucking listen to it all the time. Now, it like sometimes that didn't work because you got shit that sucked or whatever, and you're like, I can't believe I fucking wasted my money on this. But on the same end, there was shit that like it didn't hit at first, but then because I had to listen to it, I'm just like, you know, actually I dig this now. Yeah, I mean, it, you know, I think there is something for that to have that kind of grow that grow on you, or to kind of give it space and give it room to grow. Whereas like now everything is so like this right here, like that shit. It doesn't always hit the same way. And like the bands that are like that blow up like overnight, they don't get a chance to like to grow as a band or whatever. It's like they're like, everyone always like, this is the best thing that's ever happened in like in the fucking history of creation or whatever. And then until the next day when the new best thing that's ever happened in the history of creation. Yeah, right. It's like you don't have a chance to really grow as a band or artist or whatever the fuck, you know. It's and I mean, that's kind of like, you know, first world problems, right? It's like, we get stuff too easy now or whatever, but it is sad to have that change that much, you know.
I laugh like that because it's so relatable in hearing, you know, like other cats, you know, mention with like maybe an allowance or maybe something you forked up a couple of bucks and went and bought a CD or a tape, and then you're like, what did I do? Like, I can't bring this thing back, and it's absolutely atrocious. But there's that beautiful aspect of like going and actually like really trying to, you know, pound it in and then listening to, you know, finding some qualities and doing things that maybe it's a little bit out of your scope. But
no, I mean,
So relatable.
there's a lot of shit too. Yeah, a lot of shit that when I was younger, I'm just like, no, fuck that. Like it's, I'm not feeling it. And then, it later on or whatever, I'm like, I'm gonna listen to that again. I'm listening. You know what? Actually, no, I dig it now. I mean, there's a bunch of shit that, especially when I was younger, because my head kind of started like once I started getting into like kind of heavier and kind of crazier sounding shit, that was like what I was into or whatever. And so there was like good records that came out that I heard and I'm just like, this isn't like fast enough or it's not hardcore enough or whatever. And I mean a lot of that is like having to do with I think being young, but also on the same end it's like you yeah, I think it's kind of like just you change as you get older or whatever. Certain things kind of like this didn't hit me or didn't speak to me the same way, and like as someone as an older person or whatever, you start to feel a little bit more.
Yeah. Now, I mean, within these interests and within like the bands you start, you kind of mentioned getting into some heavier stuff, discovering hardcore. Earlier musicians, as a part of, kind of really looking at like band and musicianship and, different people, who are some cats that really stood out to you as far as maybe not so much inspirational, but like moments of like, how are they doing this? How is this guy playing so fast? Why does it sound like this?
Like Dave Lombardo from Slayer, yeah, like, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, and, I mean, to be honest, like I've fucking picked up playing drums just fucking around or whatever. Like I wish I should have taken lessons. I should have gone all this. But I mean, yeah,
doing
like,
all right.
oh, well, thanks. But the thing is that like the way that he plays is very, I think that's the thing too. It's like, it's not, yeah, it's just like, it's all like crazy and like kind of, yeah, like I don't know exactly like a good way to describe it, to quantify it or whatever, but it's like anyone that hears that, it's just like, yeah, holy shit.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Fucking Slayer hippie from Poison Idea, he also is like very technical or whatever, like, and obviously played in like marching band and shit like that, you can tell just the way, but his shit was just crazy too. Nicky Anderson from Entombed, I love the way he fucking plays.
Man.
Yeah, man. Like, and that's the thing is like, cause like Entombed again, or like what, especially I kind of, and this is my own fault, but like I loved the first couple records that came out, and then when Wolverine Blues came out, I was like, again, not ready for like, oh, this is slightly different or whatever. And I love that record now, but like at the time, I'm like, I don't know, man. And I should have fucking, and I went to go see him, when they toured for the early records or whatever, but I should have continued to see him because I really liked that record. I like the record after it or whatever. Like basically all the stuff he played on was really fucking good. So he's awesome. I mean, there's so many people like basically like, at least for like hardcore metal or whatever. Yeah, like for other drummers, like Clyde Stubblefield, who played for, JB's and James Brown band, fucking amazing. Max Roach, amazing. There's a lot of jazz. Fucking Sheila E, because, again, because I love Prince and everything, like Sheila E shit, fucking great. Tito Puente, I mean, there's a lot of like drumming that kind of, definitely is an influence. I can't play like any of them, but it was like, oh shit, that's awesome. It's cool to like try different things. And, I mean, yeah, like I'm trying to think. I mean, there's definitely other like punk and I mean, like Rat Scabies and shit from the Damned. I mean, there's a lot of people that it's like, and I mean, I guess on that end, because it's kind of like, it reminds me of Keith Moon or whatever from the Who, I mean, it's like, yeah, like, I mean, there's a lot just that you can hear. And I kind of like, I appreciate, all styles or whatever, the way that people play and shit, but I like kind of this crazy all over the fucking place. bass, like playing that some of these dudes, you know, like Keith Moon does. Is what it's like you can't replicate, like you can't replicate
Yeah.
that or whatever. You know, I
101.
mean, yeah, right. It's just, it's like, and that's like, you know, I think to me, it's like I think some people are like they worry too much about like, oh, is this you know technically perfect or whatever, and it's like I kind of like the feel of like going off of like fuck it, like that's it, that might not have worked out or whatever, but you're doing something different and it sounds cool or what. I don't know, I just
I
think
love that.
yeah, and I mean I guess again because it's like I didn't take lessons and shit, so it's like a lot of it was just like trial and error, like fucking around, and like, you know, a lot of stuff I was doing wrong for a long time or whatever, but I tried to make it work on my end. And so, you know, it's like you see people like criticize like the way I played when I was younger and shit. I'm just like, you know what, man, it was what fucking was. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's like you don't dig it, and this is the way I look at it with everything. It's like if you don't dig what people are doing, instead of fucking talking shit on the internet, complaining or whatever, like do your own shit and then see if people
Yeah.
dig it or not. And if they dig it, cool, you know. And I mean, there's a lot of awesome bands that people don't give the love to, and it's just like you just gotta roll with it, right? It's like some people are lucky and some people aren't. Some people like get recognition and some people don't. The people deserve recognition and people like are just not, I don't know, they're looking the other way or whatever. So you do your thing, and eventually they might love it, and they still might not fucking care about it. But if you're happy with it, and if you're like,
good time.
yeah, if you're having a good time, basically, I mean, that's the way I've looked at it throughout the whole time, the last 30 whatever years of playing music. It's like I have fun doing it. It might not be something that I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. It sounds great, but it's like, but it was fun. So fuck it. Like that's more important
You know,
to me. You know.
It's funny because like on two different notes, you know, just as far as like the older that I've gotten, I've grown to understand more about myself, you know, as opposed to, you know, kind of when I was younger. And maybe this even goes along the lines of you, of when, you know, when we're learning, I never had lessons or anything like that, but I'm trying to play with Slayer and I'm trying to play with, you know, these big players, even Rush, you know, putting on something like this. It's like you're kind of trying to like embody, you know, this like style while you're playing, but then as you get older, you know, you just kind of feel like, hey, I love and appreciate what it is that they do. That's probably never going to be me. But, you know, having that appreciation, having that kind of angle of like, man, this is awesome. Or like the dude, you know, from Dillinger Escape Plan, like, that's never going to be me.
Yeah.
but I definitely, you know, love and appreciate it. It's awesome.
Yeah. I think that the issue or the problem with a lot of music is that people were like, I need to replicate this exactly. We're going to put out a record that looks exactly like this band's record, and we're going to sound exactly like them, and I'm going to play exactly like them. And you lose a lot from that. Now, if you're like, that's awesome what they did, that influences me, and that makes me want to do my own shit, that's cool. Trying to replicate it exactly, great. But it's like, but that you lose a lot from that to me. That's kind of like, or at least that's not what I'm looking for. I think there are other people who are like, yeah, it has to be perfect and has to look, you know, like I like this band because they sound exactly like this band. But I'd rather be like, hey, that dude's or that person is trying, they're making music and they're playing it, and I can feel that energy. I can feel what they're trying to put across or whatever, even if they're not like the best musician or the whatever. I just think you lose a lot when you're just trying to replicate shit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I mean, it even kind of shines through in like bands nowadays that are recording a record with like an iPhone. You know, and it's like the music first and foremost like stands through. You don't need this huge studio. You have something that rips. You have something that has that energy. It has its own, you know, style. Maybe it's still aggressive. Maybe it's whatever. Yeah, I mean, absolutely great point. Don't try to, you know, completely replicate something and go out and, you know, have your own integrity behind it and fun.
Well, I mean, also too, it's like the people that talk shit about like, oh, these bands, you know, they're not good enough musicians or whatever. They're fun, like they're fucking, you know, like Neil Peart or they're whatever. When they're pretty, usually pretty fucking basic, whatever bullshit. Okay, cool. You fucking took some lessons, so you know paradiddles and all that bullshit or whatever. But it's like, but don't like I'd much rather watch a band that's like all right, yeah, this like we just picked up our instruments and we're fucking pissed off and we're saying this and this is like the energy that we're putting forth. I'd much rather watch that than watch someone with no soul fucking play it and yeah, it's perfect or whatever, but it's like yeah, it just that's not my thing. So
Yeah. So I love all that, man. And kind of, like going into that. So you kind of mentioned, like your first band, and I don't want to completely like rack you on this or throw it up, but kind of within just the awesome rad stuff that you've been involved with. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a timeline as far as from these earlier bands and how you were introduced to Cats, and then where it went into the next band, even recently, if you can.
yeah, so I met Joe Phillips who he plays guitar for the Repos now. But we met skating and hung out a lot. So we actually did like a couple of bands that just didn't it was just fucking around or whatever for like a couple of years and shit. So we played our very first show, I want to say in 1992, like in the summer of 92 with a band. It was stupid. It was just like me, him, and this other dude, Brian, and we fuck, it was called Infant Father, and it didn't do like it's like people like hopefully people aren't gonna be like, oh, I need to find Infant Father shit. It's like we didn't we have maybe like a practice tape or whatever. I don't even remember how the fuck we got on a show, but we got on a show in yeah, in this town called Rockford, which is actually I think it's the second biggest city in Illinois or whatever, but it wasn't far from DeKalb, so we used to go to shows there. There was a place called the Cherry Lounge or whatever. I have no recollection on like how we fucking got on a show there, but we did. So we played and there was no one there or whatever, which is cool. Which is fine because it was like we probably shouldn't have fucking played a show anyways. But then me and Joe and this dude Craig that we met, who is in the Repos still, he plays drums for him or whatever. Like we started a band called the Meshuganas, and so that was in 1993. I left the Meshuganas in 94. I started Charles Bronson in 94. I joined Los Crudos in 95. I joined, so it's like Los Crudos. I'd met Martin a long ass time ago, anyways, like way before Crudos even started or whatever, because he used to like he's older than me or whatever, but he's been going to shows for a long time. He did a fanzine called What the Fuck. He put out a record, or put out a couple of records, but he put out this compilation called There's a Fungus Among Us. And so I think I first met Martin when I was a little kid. I bought There's a Fungus Among Us from him. It was all like local bands at the time. So like it was Screeching Weasel and Bullpal Stiffs and Only the Strong, which was Tony Victory from Victory's band or whatever. Okay. And some other bands or whatever. Oh, Gear, and I don't remember who else. But he put that out and some other records. So I bought some records from him. But like I was always down with Crudos because they were singing in Spanish. They were a hardcore band at the time when they're like, I mean, Chicago was very pop punk, like in the 90s or whatever, very pop punk centric or whatever. And it's like, I like some of those bands, the bands that were starting to do it at first, like Gear and, like Screeching Weasel and bands like that, even though I wasn't like super into them or whatever. It's like I dug them, like Sludgeworth. Those bands were cool. The bands that kind of like started to ape them, and then there was like, it seemed like it was like turning into the only music that was being played around Chicago was not my thing. It was not something like I was more into hardcore, more into faster, kind of crazier sounding music. Crudos was a hardcore band or whatever. I was into the fact that they were singing in Spanish, singing about shit that was happening in the neighborhood or whatever, problems, like issues that Latin American people are dealing with or whatever. So I was into that. There was a lot of shows I was like the only one singing along to them in Spanish or whatever.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and so I was just like at a Charles Bronson show. Martine was there. Sorry, I'm like, I know I'm skipping ahead or whatever. I guess to go back to Charles Bronson, I met Mark and John, the singer and the bass player from Charles Bronson. When I was in the Meshuganas, we played with Mark had a band called The Rejected, and John had a band called well, he had a couple bands. He had POV, and then he had Shotgun Baby or whatever. So we would play there. Used to play. John used to do shows at his parents' house or whatever. Um, to yeah, so like I had known them. I was talking with Mark, and we were like, he was into the same kind of like hardcore that was into like 80s hardcore shit and like the cool bands that were happening in the early 90s or whatever, like the Slap of Hand was pointing out, like, like Crossed Out and No Comment and Spaz and bands like that. So we kind of like, we related on that. So we're like, let's do like, I remember talking with him. I'm like, dude, we should do like, like an old, like kind of DC or like Boston hardcore sounding band or whatever. He's like, yeah, that's awesome. He's like, I was going to do a band with John, so let's try and do this or whatever. So that's kind of how we all met and we started doing shit. And then, yeah, sorry, to go back to Crudos, I, was into that. I was at a Charles Bronson, or Martin was at a Charles Bronson show. We were talking, and G.O.Y.L, their first drummer, he's like, I don't know if Joel's going to continue doing this. So I'm like, okay, like I'll play drums for you guys if you want or whatever. And he's like, all right, cool, and then, so it just happened like that. And so I joined them. Um, After that, I want to say 96, I was in a band called Trepidation with some people that were from Sycamore's, this town right next to DeKalb. And then, fuck, after that, oh, I joined MK Ultra in 1997. The people from MK Ultra were either from DeKalb or the guitarist and the drummer were in a band called Weed Eater, not the Weed Eater that's popular now, like the sludge metal band, or where there's a hardcore band called Weed Eater that they used to play in DeKalb in like 1990 or whatever. And so those dudes after Weed Eater joined a band called Silence with Kirk, who's the bass player from MK Ultra. And so we used to go see Silence and hang out with them and shit like that. So it's like I knew them from that. And so I joined them. After that, 2000, I joined Ruination. And that was from meeting the singer, Chris. I met him when Crudos played in Toronto or whatever. We played with his band, The Swarm. And he just called me and he was just like, hey man, do you want to do like a band or whatever? I'm like, what, like a project band? He's like, yeah, or like a full band or whatever. I'm like, yeah, we can try it or whatever. I'm like, I was still, here, and he was still in Toronto and shit. But I'm like, fuck it, we'll try it. And so it was like, the guitarist was Andy, he was in a band called Earth Mover. He's from Detroit, or Ann Arbor rather. But so we would meet in Ann Arbor because it was like halfway for me and halfway for the Toronto dudes or whatever, and we would practice there. We weren't around that long, but we kind of did a lot. We toured and put out records and shit. After that, I started punching, or actually around the same, like before Ruination broke up, I'd started punching the face with Jeff, who was in MK Ultra, and Charles Bronson, and Dave, who, oh yeah, he was in Dearborn SS. Dave, the bass player from Dearborn SS, and Jeff Rice, who played in Dearborn SS and played in, he was in Ottawa and he was in the Mall. He's from Michigan, from Dearborn. Okay. Yeah.
Sick. Okay.
Yeah. So, but he had moved to Chicago. So we started that. We did that for a while. I was in a couple bands during that time. I started playing drums for Calvary, which also had Matt Weeks, who was in Ottawa and Current, and Nama, and who was also from Michigan or whatever, who moved to Chicago. Played drums for them. And then after, because like Punch in the Face played for a while, but we ended up it took us a long time to kind of like we did shit at the first couple of years, but then like as the years got on, we all started like doing shit very rarely, but we kept on doing it. And so we finally did an LP, and then like broke up the next year. Then after, yeah, well, no, well, I mean, which is fine because it was just like it just felt like this is time. We were together for like 7 years or whatever, and so it just felt like oh, you know what, this I don't know. We just kind of felt like it had ran its course or whatever. It's time to do different shit.
Sure.
So then after that, I played drums for a band called Closing In with my friends Nate and Matt and CJ, who I know, you know, Nate's also from Michigan or whatever. He moved here. I met him a long time ago, and we were, you know, I lived with him for a while. And then CJ had been in the Fighters. He used to play with the Meshuganas. You know, it's like, yeah. Like, it's just like all a bunch of, you know, like a lot of these bands are just like people that I've just known through the years. Like, we're just kind of like, oh, let's, you know, try something new or whatever. And just like that. Yeah. So after that, I did a few more, you know, like I know that was already like 20 minutes of me talking about bands I've been in. I've been in a couple other bands since then or whatever, doing a, like, I haven't played drums since Closing In, but I, you know, since I started singing Punch in the Face, I sang for a couple bands after that or whatever, like a band called Affront, a band called Dog Flashback, most recently. And I did Pillage, yeah, before that. Dude. So it's like, yeah.
And I gotta say, through this, one of the things that I love, you know, doing this is kind of, you know, even discovering things. I've been familiar with you now for like some years, and going through, you know, those Crudos and having Charles Bronson. Pillage, I had never heard of until starting to like really trying to dig into like interviews or different things. Oh my God, that is so sick.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Was it just the EP and the demo then?
We did, yeah. So we just did those two things, basically because it was like I wanted to do a band. Yeah, it was like after. Like so. I'm sorry to go back. I played drums for Closing In. After that, I did a band called Pitfall, which was with the other guys from Punch in the Face, and I was singing. But then we recorded, some changes happened, and I played drums and sang on that recording or whatever. When I was doing that, then yeah, like the guys from Pillage, which is Kirk, who was in MK Ultra and those other bands, and then John, who was in Charles Bronson, and this other dude, we started something where, you know, I'm just like, I want to do a band that's like kind of faster, like hardcore again or whatever, because it's like at the time, you know, it really felt well, and it kind of like everything started to kind of like, it's always been super splintered in Chicago, where it's like everyone kind of hangs out with their own sub scenes and all this shit. Yeah. I was always in, you know, I'm into hardcore, like all different types of hardcore or whatever. But I was like, I want to do something that's kind of like Infest, or, you know, a band like that where it's just like fast and hard or whatever. But not be like it has to sound exactly the same. It's just like, this is like the feeling of what I want to try and do with it. Sure. So we did that, yeah. We did the demo and did, yeah, the 7-inch after. Like the demo got turned into a 7-inch, and then we did another 7-inch after that. But it was kind of like that. Also, just kind of fell apart. Like everyone just kind of started doing other bands and, you know, shit like that, and just kind of like, you know, some people are not getting along as well, and it's just like, you know, it's just like, fuck it. we'll move on, just start doing something different.
Oh man,
yeah,
dude. I was, I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, I was, you know, I'd been familiar and had been listening, you know, to Charles Bronson, Los Crudos, through like some time, but then finding that, I was like, whoa. Okay, so and I guess continuing on that, and within, maybe this isn't necessarily the case, but I feel like it's a thing within drummers where after you play for some time, the only goal that you become to, you know, kind of come to find yourself is, how do I get out of playing drums?
yeah.
Maybe it's not everybody. I mean, you know, but yourself successfully, I feel like kind of did.
Well,
that.
I mean, dude, yeah, like, well, I think
play, but
I mean,
taking on vocals.
but I mean, it is kind of like there's a lot of singers that were drummers, to begin with or whatever. It's like you got Phil Collins, Morris Day from Morris Day and the Time is a fucking sick drummer. If you ever seen him play drums, and he played drums on a bunch of Prince shit or whatever too. He's awesome. I mean, just like there's, I think maybe there is something about it where it's like you feel like you're maybe you're hidden too much by the drums or whatever, and you want to put yourself out there, like you kind of have more energy from doing that, so you want to do this. And I think I just really wanted to try it and see how it worked out. I mean, that's the thing, is like with Punch to the Face, it's like I'm happy, we had a good time doing it, but yeah, there's a lot of shit that was kind of a learning curve for me personally, where it's just like I needed to, and it just kind of came up where it was like they were doing, Jeff and Rice and Dave were like, hey, we're gonna do this band. I'm like, oh, I'll sing for you guys or whatever, and it just kind of turned out like that,
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, but yeah, I think it is something that, like fucking Shaka Khan, she's a fucking awesome drummer, and she's an amazing singer. I think there's a lot of people that like I don't know if it just is something about like being trapped behind the kid or whatever. You feel like you want to go out and be center stage or whatever for once, but also too, it's like you said, it also helps to not have to, you don't have to carry anything really. you don't have to do anything really. You just go and you talk to people while your band is setting up or no, I'm just, I don't know, but I mean, there is something having to do with that too, I guess,
Now, so within, your that first take and, that first, kind of dawning of like you taking on vocals, were there certain records, were there certain kind of people that, not to say by any means mimicking, but, that you're kind of practicing with and you're kind of getting your own sound to where, you're finally doing it in front of people and you're a little bit more comfortable than if you're just, stepping out and doing karaoke, for instance?
I think like, in terms of people that influence me in terms of like how, because there's people that I never at least tried to sound like him, but he is definitely, because his voice is so strong, but like Choke from Negative Effects and Slapshot, Last Rites or whatever, and people compared my vocals to his vocals a lot or whatever, but like that his voice, and I mean, his voice was always like super strong, and like I like the way that sounds. Joe from Infest is definitely like another, like in terms of like how the power that he has in his voice. Trying to think who else. I mean, LG Petrov from Entombed is another person that had like super like it's brutal but like clear sounding, like you can like make on, but I'm not good at enunciation. Like when I'm yelling or whatever, it's like it's not like that, but that is something that like, oh, that's awesome if I could get it to do that or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of singers that are like, I think very, very strong sounding in other genres of music or whatever. Like, I mean, like Chuck D from Public Enemy, Rakim from Eric B and Rakim. Those dudes' voices were super like, and it's a totally different genre of music or whatever, but that conveys power to me. That conveys like that help get what they're trying to say across. So those are like, all these are influences. I didn't try to sound like any of these people or whatever, but I mean, they're all like helping. I think for other singers or whatever, like Bjork is I love Bjork's voice, like the way that she sings, kind of like it's not like a traditional, like, or what you would say is, I don't know how to describe it, because she obviously can carry melody, but she sings in a
like haunting. Like, it's so beautiful that sometimes it's like almost a little eerie. Like,
but it's like
underlying.
But it's like when she's like singing like power, it's like there's power behind it, and like it sounds like crazy, but it's like there is a melody there too. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but like her voice always like impressed me. Chris Cornell from Soundgarden always, again, and I'm not like usually like a fan of kind of higher, you know, pitched singing or whatever. But his voice was always super powerful. They were powerful live or whatever too when I saw him a long ass time ago. And yeah, it's like there are certain singers that it's like it can kind of transcend genres or whatever for me or whatever. Like in terms of like yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say, but for hardcore, like I said, Choke, Joe from Infest, uh, Chris Elder from Despise You too had a super like brutal voice, and but again, like you could make out what he was saying and shit.
Right.
Now, I should have those people that you can make out what they're saying influence me more, but like that's not the case or whatever. But I was always impressed with that. I'm trying to fucking think of it. I mean, there's so many people, man. It's like, you know, like, yeah.
No. Go ahead. Sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt.
No. Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, there's so many people that, like, I mean, Danzig, you know, obviously, you know, like, yeah, like, it's, I love, like, the Misfits and Sam Hain and the first two Danzig records or whatever. Even though I'm starting to dig, like, the third and the fourth one more, you know, as I've gotten older. But you know, like obviously he's another person who can actually sing and shit. And fucking HR from the Bad Brains. I don't even know how I didn't even think about that. Like HR is like the Bad Brains are like my favorite fucking band. So it's like he is definitely like fucking like the power to be able to sing in different the range or whatever, sing in different ways or whatever, like, you know, all that yeah, definitely HR.
Now, so you mentioned, and I think this kind of goes along, maybe this is going to be a little bit more, you know, overly obvious, but within, you know, like the likes of hip hop and within the likes of drumming for so long and then taking on vocals, like the cadence, is there something to where like you kind of find yourself from having that experience for all those years, you know, do you kind of find yourself having like a little bit of a different time where you go to, you know, kind of push something that's like, maybe this is a little bit too straightforward and change something up a little bit from having those influences?
Are you talking about on drumming, you're saying?
On your vocals.
Oh, on vocals? Well, no, I mean, it I think definitely playing drums definitely helped with timing, with being able to figure out how to make things fit when you are singing something, and like how you can the thing is that because I do listen to a lot of hip hop when I've written lyrics, sometimes it's like I want to write more than what would fit into a fucking punk song like that. Like it doesn't fit like that. So it's kind of like I've had to cut it down a lot or whatever. So that's something that like with hip hop the you know the influence of like, you know, the rating or writing within like that 16 bar structure or whatever, and that's not the same as like a 4/4 like punk you know song or whatever. So it's been having to try and like get that to fit, but yeah, it definitely it's an influence. It like to see and also interesting to see like how people do shit with breath control, with how they like how they get words and cadences to fit in the structure within a song. Like I would definitely, you know, I definitely take that and try and, you know, think about that when I'm doing it. And like I said, when I'm playing drums, it helps me to think of like keeping within the time and like, you know, making sure I'm hitting the fours and hitting everything, you know, right or whatever. I think that definitely all those things come in as like as an influence. So yeah.
Okay. Shit, I love that. I mean, now like within what's the difference, you know, maybe even early on through like today for your prep for playing live? And I guess we can even start with drums, you know, as far as like if you have some kind of practices, if you do some stretching, maybe just drinking a water, you know, or a beer, or, you know, whatever it may be.
Well, right now, yeah, I had to fucking like I've had surgery on my wrist before. I have a plate in my wrist, and I also have I had surgery on my spine and shit. So like I have a bunch of things that I have to stretch and I have to like be able to to get warmed up before playing. Like if I play drums now, it's like I have to, like when I was younger, I didn't think about it at all. I just went and fucking played and just was fine, you know, like, and I think because I played so much that it just like didn't affect me. Like now it's like I don't play as often, so I definitely have to warm up. I have to get in a good space to be able to do, you know, to play, and especially play for an extended amount of time. So yeah, like a lot of like, you know, I have practice pads and shit that I'll just kind of warm up my wrists on, but do a lot of stretching. And actually for singing too, because it's like, you know, fucking yelling and all that. It's like it you notice, especially after you have a fucking spine fusion or whatever, that you have to, your back puts a lot into, and maybe it's because I'm doing it wrong because I didn't take lessons or whatever, but it's like I have to fucking warm up. I gotta like move around, like kind of get moving and shit to get my body feeling all right to do either. You know, so it's like, and I mean it's kind of like, yeah, like when you're in your 40s or whatever, your late 40s, or, you know, like you feel a lot more and shit. So it's
back.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean it is kind of like you definitely have to warm up. You gotta like your body has to be ready. You can't just pick up and, you know, start playing or start yelling or whatever because you fucking feel it. Like then, well, you feel it either when you're doing it. Definitely, you feel it the next day or later on. Shit. So, you know.
Yeah. Now, within your opportunity, and you know, just from me reading and kind of listening to different things with Martine and you know, within Los Crudos, what were some, you know, some highlights and maybe even some, you know, scary learning experiences of the traveling that you guys did with the band?
Well, we toured a lot, so we pretty much went all over the world. You know, we did the U.S. a couple times. We did Canada. We did Mexico. We did South America twice. We did Europe. We went to Japan. So like we went all over the place. We went to, you know, there was countries in areas that are dealing with a lot of like political strife, with a lot of like issues going on in their day-to-day lives or whatever, and that basically that can influence the things that are going on, you know, either at a gig or also just around you when you're on the street or whatever. So I mean there was definitely like when we toured Mexico in 1998, there was several things that happened that were kind of, you know, like we played in Mexico City. Mexico City is I think still the largest city in the world. Is gigantic. And a lot of these shows get very packed or whatever. A lot of people, you know, don't have a lot of money, so there are a lot of shows that people try and rush the door to get in. One of the first show that we played in 1998, we played a very big kind of like open warehouse looking thing. It had like a metal roof on it, and this basically they had like a big metal gate to get in. People started like beating on the gate, started throwing like rocks and bottles and all that stuff, and it was like raining kind of raining through the openings in the metal gate, and just like started fucking up shit outside, like destroying cars and stuff like that. And then they eventually let them in, and it was like this huge gigantic mass of people came in. And it's like we played. It was cool. Like, I mean, it's good that they let them in or whatever, so that there wasn't any more issues that could happen or whatever. We played, and just like because Martin made a film called Más allá de los gritos, which is Beyond the Screams, that you can probably see on YouTube, I think. But there's a scene that's from the show that we played after everyone came in, and it's like this gigantic mass of people all dancing while we're playing, like throughout the whole warehouse. It's like 1,000, 1,500 people or whatever, all like going insane. And it's like, that's kind of like how it was or whatever. That was like, like the energy and shit. And it was, it was awesome or whatever, but it was like, that should happen. And then the next, not the next day, but like the day after or whatever, we played another place and they were going to try and do the same shit. And the people that owned the club had machine guns and were on top of the roof and we're going to shoot everyone. And we didn't know this was going on because we were inside or whatever. So there were some people that we knew that we saw afterwards who told us about it. And it's like shit like that. I mean, this is a reality or whatever there. But it was also like to feel kind of helpless in terms of like, I don't want anyone to get fucking hurt or whatever to come see our band. So that was very like, like that. I mean, not only that, like some other shit happened there, like that, like a dude, we were at a party or whatever after one of the shows and I went, cause I was just like, I'm tired. I want to go sleep. So me and, and, Pablo, who was our roadie or whatever. And, this other girl, this girl that was dating Juan or whatever that was with us, we went to this guy's house. Like he was like, oh, you can stay here. But some dude came into that party with a gun and robbed everyone and shit. And Jose was like passed out, but he like got all his shit stolen or whatever. So I mean, it's shit like that was like, we saw, because we were, all these places we were going, we were staying with people and seeing the real life experience of what people are going through. So, a lot of countries were still dealing with a lot of like crazy shit. So you see what the reality of it. And it's kind of like, obviously there's shit that's going on here too or whatever, but it's like you get to see, because we were staying with people, not staying in hotels and shit like that. We were like seeing like, hey, this is what the real life experience of people that live here, like what they're seeing. So we saw that in Brazil, a bunch of crazy shit happened. I mean, like basically every country that we went to in Latin America, it had a military dictatorship. So some had ended earlier, and so they had more time to kind of grow from that. And some it hadn't, like it ended maybe like 8 years or 7 years or 6 years before that and shit. So you still saw the after effects of what's going on there. The same in Spain or whatever, where my family's from. It's like there's still the after effects of the military dictatorship. It looms large or whatever. It looms in how the government treats the people in terms of like how, I guess people that had family killed or disappeared, and this is for all these countries, how they deal with the loss of the loved one, of seeing the people that murdered their family, see like them have nothing happen to them, shit like that or whatever. So it's like you see all that, and that's kind of like, that was the, and I mean, I know your question probably wasn't asking about all this shit, but it's like, but
I mean, it kind of, because, and I don't want to cut you off, but it was the thought of like, with some of the things, and you mentioned some of the dictatorships and some of the very militant, operations that were going on still. I mean, obviously we're in 2023 and this shit is still a thing, but like throughout the 90s and throughout, some of these countries, there were some pretty extreme things that were happening. Right. So that was kind of, like what I was looking at as far as like if you guys had any sort of experience or any, difficulty with travels, and sounds like it.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. Is like,
but the first-hand experience of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of it's because like, I mean that's the thing. It's like we were there, but we're like traveling through and shit. So it's like, we can remove ourselves from a situation, but all these like awesome people that we stayed with and got to meet, this is their fucking day-to-day reality or whatever, and it's like, and so that you know, and I mean, all of us again, Martin's from Uruguay, Jose, Juan, their family from Mexico or from Mexico. It's like all of us have had experience or whatever seeing this shit, and seeing shit happen in the US or whatever, but it's like it's kind of like so we're not, you know, we're aware of it, we know all these things going on, but it also, you know, there was things that like it's real. I think when you live in the US, sometimes it's like it's real easy to focus on, oh well, this is going on here, but you don't have a full view of everything that's happening around the world and shit. So it's like to be able to, you know, I count myself very lucky to have been able to experience all this, to be able to see how people lived and get to meet so many awesome people that, you know, people that were like dealing with like really heavy shit and would still help you out or give you everything they could or whatever. It's like that's fucking, you know, it was amazing, you know, in that sense. So, but I mean, to my point or whatever, it's like, yeah, we also could get it. Like we were in Brazil the first time, and there was basically, you know, and I've told this story before, but I figure I'll tell it because it fits into what you're asking. But it basically in '97 there was the military police, who are called the Hota, the ROTA, were basically like a death squad or whatever, going around and like killing street kids and killing like punk kids and killing kids that, you know, like that just didn't fit in with what they wanted and were able to get away with it. And when we were there, we were in a neighborhood, and this dude Dumpster, who's from Minneapolis, who he rode trains and hitchhiked through South and Central America and lived in, you know, Brazil for a while before, and he happened to be there when we were there. We had met him from the U.S. or whatever, because he's or I think he's from New York originally, but he was living in Minneapolis and shit in the '90s. But he was down there, and we were walking. We had stayed at these people's house, and we were walking to, like, I think go get something to eat or maybe to go meet some other people. And it was me and Dumpster and this woman Kim that was with us, that's from Chicago. And then a couple just like Brazilian punk kids, and we were walking, and we were talking, and Dumpster was like, hey, if you see, you know, police that are wearing these gray uniforms, he's like, don't go anywhere near them because they'll kill you, like literally kill you, and not, it won't be a fucking thing. They'll just they'll take you away or whatever. And he's like, if they don't like the way you look or like whatever. So he's like, oh, but don't worry about it because they never come in this neighborhood. I'm like, okay, cool. And then like a minute after he said that, they fucking pulled up in a Jeep, and they jumped out and stuck a gun in my face, and were yelling at us in Portuguese, which, you know, we don't speak. So I was telling them, you know, no falo portugués, that, you know, I don't speak Portuguese. And they're fucking like still have the gun in my face, yelling at us and yelling at like the Brazilian punk kids that we were with. And they started going through our shit, and they found like my US passport. I'm like, oh, USA, cool. And I'm like, all right, cool. You know, I had my hands up still. And they were like, you know, still yelling at this dude and getting in his face and pushing him around. And then they came up to me and they're like, Hota means you die. And I'm like, all right. You know, it's like, and at that time, because this was in the middle of the day, this was like, I don't know, like it was probably like early afternoon. And people in the neighborhood started to come out and made like a circle around us and the Hota, you know, fucking with us. And they did that, and then they're kind of like, and then they just let us go, because I think because the crowd started to gather. But then, you know, after that, like the people who drank were like, I need a drink. So we went to this bar. We went to this bar, and we're sitting, and there was an older woman there that the people that, the Brazilian kids were talking with. And she was like, yeah, they killed my, you know, you know, they killed my grandson and my nephew. I don't remember. They killed a family member of hers. And she's just like, they do what they want. There isn't anything you can do about it, and then the more that they kind of told us about it, they said, sorry, that there was, like store owners would pay them like $5, like the equivalent of $5 to kill like street kids that would like steal from them and shit. And there was a punk band that had a song against them, and they killed the singer and the bass player, and that was like not that like long before we had gotten there or whatever. Like all this shit was going on. And so we were sitting there and talking, and then it started to get dark out, and they rolled up again, and like with their lights off, and we're just looking at us, and we're just like fuck, and so like they pulled off, and we need to get the fuck out of here or whatever. So basically what people had said was like, if it had been at night, it was because it was during the day that they didn't kill us, that like they let us go. So if it had been at night, they would have probably just taken us away, and no one would have fucking known or done anything about it. And so like that's the thing, is like all the people that we met down there who didn't have barely anything, but they fucking like did what they could to help us out, to give us a place to stay, gave us food, shit like that. And so it's like, yeah, you got to see the shit, like all the people we knew down there. I mean, I know people with guns up here, whatever. People down there had guns because they're just like this is the only way I'm gonna fucking make it. It was like, yeah, it was a fucking like, because I mean, to be honest, like at the time, like I knew of the Brazilian dictatorship, military dictatorship. I knew it ended. Didn't know exactly what was going on. Beyond like hearing like some punk records or whatever, but it's like didn't fully know about that. Didn't know that was what was going on. And now there's like books that write exposés about that the military police during that time, and all the corruption and all the shit they were doing, and like the thousands of people they fucking killed, and how nothing happened, and how it was all done under the auspice of the government or whatever. Yeah, so it's like that was that was shit that we saw. And I mean, yeah, we also saw beautiful wonderful shit that was great too or whatever. We got to meet amazing people, but then we also got to see what people were really dealing with or whatever. And it's like at the time when people are like, it's still like there is a difference between, yes, there's a lot of oppression and fucked up shit that happens here too, but then there's people that it's kind of like you see they would be like, well, that's not anything that we have to deal with down there. So I mean, it's just, yeah, it's a fucking crazy situation or whatever. But then we went back to Brazil in 2013, and I was telling people some of those stories or whatever, and they were just like, oh my God, like I can't believe that happened or whatever. So it's like it's changed a lot.
Wow.
That's incredible. Yeah. So I mean, when we were there, when I was telling people, they're just like, yeah, that they killed my friend or whatever. Like it's like, that's yeah, like what was going on or whatever. It was kind of crazy. But I mean, again, it's like I also appreciate the fact, well, I mean, it's easy to say this because I'm still alive or whatever, but it's like I appreciate the fact that I was able to see what people dealt with or whatever, and appreciate, yeah, like what I have and what they were able to, like what people offered me and what all this shit. It's just, it's, you see, it makes you kind of see like how things are in life or whatever, and like how what you should appreciate, and what you should fight for and fight against, and try and help people out if you can, and shit like that. So
beautiful. I mean, what was there any sort of hesitancy in going back? in 2013?
No, I mean, no.
Okay.
And I mean, maybe this is my own, it's like I've had crazy shit happen here. It's like it's kind of not again, not like, oh, I know I can get killed super easy. That's not it. I'm not fucking tough guy. I'm not whatever. I'm just, but it's like, yeah, we really, I think, gain something from being able to go to countries that people wouldn't normally go to, or play for people that you wouldn't normally get to play for. Um, because I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, well, we're doing this tour, but we're only going to hit this place and this place and this place. And it's like, if someone offered for us to go somewhere and are helping to set it up, and they're able to, get it where do what they can to help you out or whatever, then it's like we try to do what we can to take part of that.
I mean, that is absolutely awesome, and even like recently, I've seen firsthand a couple of friends that I've grown to know through here. Gag. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
From Washington.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I've heard of. Yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah.
Them, and then Candy, and there was a couple other guys that are like in Japan right now, and
Yeah.
just like smaller spots where guys that I followed, all of a sudden they're tagging, like, oh my gosh, I got to see Candy. And it's like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
and I love the fact of being able to like talk with them, and we actually have to like talk through like a translator, just as far as like, because I don't speak Japanese.
Yeah.
Right. He doesn't speak English, but it's so sick, being able to like talk and kind of have these like common grounds, and like, holy crap, well, I played with that band, dude. Like,
yeah,
awesome.
And one, I think that's definitely one of the beautiful things about playing music and about the punk scene and hardcore scene or whatever, is that like I can meet people from all around the world, and we're able to relate on shit like that. Like, oh, this band is awesome, or like, or I like your band. Well, I mean, it's like it's nothing is. It's very nothing surprises me more that someone from a country I've never been to is like, oh, I love your band or whatever, I love your music and shit. That's amazing. Like, and like I appreciate that, and that, like, that's that's a real appreciation. That's like that I'm able to do something that like someone is like, yeah, like I can relate to what you're doing and what you're saying and what like this. It's like we might be growing up differently, or we might be living differently, but like I can relate to all this, and I think that's something that is definitely important or whatever. That's something that it other, not only like do I have fun doing this, but if it's shit like that can happen or whatever, that's definitely that means something to me. That's something that like that's the reason why I do it or whatever. That's the reason why like I continue to do things in a way that try and do DIY shit and try and do it's like that's why I think I do see a meaningfulness in that. So I think that's that's something that I'm glad that it's I don't know. It's hard to put into words, really, but it's like but yeah, I think that is something that is important to me.
It's a beautiful thing, and I think it's cool too, from you having the experience of going to these different countries and seeing a whole different set of hardships. Obviously, we have our own things over here, and you see things that people are dealing with possibly every day. Different conditions. Possibly a little bit even harder off. But it's always it's cool to kind of have like that thing in common and that kind of bond, and like you said, not even knowing somebody, but like digging into just like, oh my god, you listen to this, and within you kind of touching on some of those stories. Any of those like the experiences, was that something that was just firsthand like lyrical inspiration, as far as you going and having to put down in story or a song at all?
I mean, not specifically. I think like everything that I would say that there's stuff that, yeah, I mean, it a lot of what I do, or like when I write lyrics, it's kind of like you know, not always, like some of it's been kind of more like whatever, joking, silly, whatever. But it's like, you know, more recently over the last say 10 years with bands I've been doing, I've been writing kind of more like protest style lyrics and shit. So it's like, and you know, to me, that is a pretty integral part of playing hardcore punk or whatever. Is part of that is like it's trying to speak out about shit that is happening in, you know, in our world, in our country, in our cities, shit like that. I think it's important to do that. I think when yeah, so I mean, seeing this in different parts of the world, I think it's informed my, it's kind of like talking about like, and talk about like, hey, this is what these people are going through and shit. And it kind of like, you know, it spreads across to different countries. It spreads across to the way the governments are set up and that they treat the people that live in these countries, the way they live in our cities, you know, shit like that. So I think overall that's you know, that's how it's influenced or whatever. I've never written specifically about shit that I've seen with that or whatever, but I think it definitely ties into, you know, because it's like for Pillage, I was writing a lot of lyrics about shit that's happening in Chicago or whatever, about like, you know, I mean, historically, it's like our city is like it's the third largest in the country. It's one of the most divided and, you know, cities in terms of like along racial lines, class and wealth lines or whatever, things like that. So, you know, I was talking about shit that was happening or whatever, and like how that affects the people that live here, and how you see people continue to get fucked over or whatever. So that's kind of like what I was talking about. So in a sense, it's like the shit that I've seen across the world definitely, you know, goes into like how I view these different systems and governments and how they treat people or whatever. So in that sense, it's influenced it or whatever, but it's not specifically about it.
Big story.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. And I mean, you knock it on the head too, you know, just as far as like listening to a hardcore band. Like there are certain times where, you know, I like if it maybe isn't even, you know, saying much of anything, you know, it's just kind of like that's uplifting. But then, you know, having something where you listen to it, you know, you're kind of maybe being enlightened on a subject that you're not aware of, or you're kind of getting to see, you know, life through the eyes of somebody and what's going on in their community, and, you know, getting in touch with that. It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
But I mean, I guess in the sense, it's like I'm not saying it like, oh, it all needs to be one way, because I think there's a space for all different types. Like there's all of lyrics and your band styles and shit and what you're talking about. And I think it's good to have that, to have different things. But I will say that I think essentially punk and hardcore it is a form, or should be a form, of kind of protest, and you should be at least aware of it. Like you don't have to sing about it or whatever, but like in your life or whatever, it should be like, you know, see people are getting fucked over and people are being mistreated. And, you know, I mean, I think it shouldn't equate to overall being like, okay, I can't, you know, I have my head in the sand or whatever. Like, I only care about what's happening to me. I don't give a shit about other people. You know, I mean, it's like, I think it, you know, there definitely should be, you know, because it's like I played in bands that like lyrics are not about like very serious subjects or whatever. It's like that, and that's fine. I think that there needs to be places for that, and I don't think it's fair to be like, well, everyone, you know, needs to be exactly like this or do things like this. But on the same end, I think just for people's well-being, I think you should think about what's happening in the world, and like, and also not be all right with it, not be all right with people getting fucked over, you know?
Yeah, right. No, I think, you know, like there is that balance. You know, obviously you have things like in your work with like Charles Bronson and some of the fun that like that, you know, kind of brings in, and like Mark's goofy sense of humor behind things.
Well, I mean, we all, like, I mean, that's how we all were, whatever. We're all sarcastic fucking asshole kids or whatever. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, that's what we were. So it's like, I think it would have been more disingenuous to be like, okay, we're all serious about, you know, like trying, you know, like, I mean, that didn't mean that I didn't give a shit about
Right.
stuff happening in the world or whatever, because just like the way that since my dad grew up in that dictatorship and got out of there and got here, whatever, he told me he would at least hey, look, this is how life is or whatever for people and shit. I think that always imbued a sense of like, you know, yeah, like of wanting justice for people or whatever. But on the same end, it's like I can fucking joke around and be stupid. And like, you know, I mean, it's like I think like well-rounded people, and this isn't to say like I don't want people to all be the same way or whatever. It's like I think a well-rounded person though can joke about something and also care about shit too, you know. So I mean, but yeah, for like, I mean, to go back, like Charles Bronson, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about like having fun and being, you know, stupid and whatever. So it's like that, you know, and I think that's fine to have that. You know, I mean, it's fine to have that. So it's like, I'm just saying for me personally or whatever, that it's like I did care about other shit too. So
Yeah, and, you know, and I mean, I think it's you've honestly, I appreciated earlier. You kind of mentioned, you know, going on like 20 minutes, you know, talking about like your bands and different, you know, endeavors, but it's such a, you know, like a catalog of cool, you know, cool shit, you know, to be able to look back.
Thanks.
And even now, like, are you involved with something currently as far as musically?
Not currently. I mean, the bands that I was doing kind of around the time the like COVID started happening, once the like all that kind of they started to, you know, fizzle out a little bit. So it's like right now, I guess technically, you know, we didn't say, oh, we're not doing Dog Flashback anymore, which is a band I sing for or whatever. But
Yeah.
but it also, we're not planning on doing anything. So I don't,
Oh,
you know, I have a feeling it's just not gonna happen. But I guess never say never. I don't fucking know, you know.
No, dude.
Yeah.
This has been honestly incredible, man. I really appreciate, you know, all the insight and awesome stories, you know, too, as far as like traveling and whatnot. Yeah, this has been so sick, bro. I
Thanks,
really
man.
appreciate the opportunity. And I'm gonna have to stay in touch, dude.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're gonna have something else coming up at
Right
some
on.
point.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And sorry, like, I know I fucking probably, I need to go through some through some public speaking, probably see courses and shit, because I have a feeling I was probably like just going off, and if someone's watching, it's like, what the fuck, you know, like, why are you talking about this or whatever. So I know I tend to ramble and shit, but thank you for giving me a chance to answer questions and everything. So
No, man. You know, these are honestly all about like the guests. I appreciate the time. It's not something, you know, that's like a selfish act on me to sit here and ramble on about what it is that I have to say. I really appreciate it, man. This has been awesome. You've had some incredible stories and insight. And bands, you know, I mean, like at some point we'll probably have to come back and maybe do a little bit more digging, but I don't want to take your whole afternoon.
We can talk more about horror shit too, whatever. I want to say R.I.P. Gianni Radici.
Oh.
Or Giovanni Radici from Gates of Hell and Make Them Die Slowly and everything. So
bummer.
yeah, well, it's just it was the same day as Jerry Springer dying or whatever. So it was kind of like I think that not that like obviously more people here know about Jerry Springer, probably than Giovanni Radici. but there's, you know, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, his passing, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, he also died. So I mean, I want to say R.I.P. because he was always like, all his movies, he always creeped me out. Like even like the movies he was barely in or whatever, it's like he's just like creepy or whatever. So, but I mean but his characters were supposed to be, so it, you know, it fell in with that.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah.
No, you know, you mentioned too the Gates of Hell. Are you familiar with Cauldron Films at all? Do you know what it's like a smaller label?
not offhand. I might have seen
Oh
some shit and
man,
I just can't think of it right now. But
they just recently they ended up doing like a standard like Blu-ray edition of it,
oh
but they released this like 4-disc just stupid edition of the Gates of Hell,
no, that's awesome.
which
Yeah.
was so. Am I
So
mixing this up now? I might be kicking myself in the butt because I might be mixing this up with another
was it
movie.
another?
I thought it was Gates of Hell.
Yeah. Well, like it's also City of the Living Dead or whatever is what.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of. Was
Yeah.
the Living Dead, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's
So,
because it's like Gates
right
of Hell.
track.
When I was younger or whatever, the first time that I rented it, it was Gates of Hell in in the 80s or whatever, and fucking just because it's like they always used to be called several different things or whatever, but like at the video store and shit, it was Gates of Hell. So I always refer to it as Gates of Hell, but
So sick. Yeah, so it is. It's City of the Living Dead. I think it, but I actually think it's printed as Gates of Hell. So which is like another cool like callback to
that's
the
cool.
original title of it. But
Right.
yeah, man,
Yeah.
I completely forgot to. I know, and then you had
It's all good.
some sick horror posts and different things too. And
Yeah.
it's funny because like I'll have different times where I'll have on a musician and it'll be like an hour into something. They're like, "Hey, I like horror movies too." But I'm like,
Yeah,
look,
dude, it's all good. I mean, yeah, no, that's cool. Like, I think it's cool that you talk about horror shit or whatever, because that's always been along with music. Like, my parents were like super into film, and so like, and kind of like put that on me at a young age or whatever. So like, I would go, they would want to go see a movie, so they would just take me with, no matter what it was or whatever. So it's
awesome.
like, so I got all that, and then I started, like when it was like VHS era or whatever, it's like rented a bunch of horror movies all the time. So that's something I'm into films in general, but like horror movies I love. So
Now, your dad originally from Spain. Did anything carry over as far as like his knowledge and different things? For you early on to be like, "Whoa, I would have never heard of this."
there was a lot. I mean, so because there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that he knew about that like came out later on in conversations and shit that like he talked about Paul Naschy, who did like the what the fucking, he was like a werewolf, like in the 70s or whatever, basically like at the very end of the military dictatorship or whatever. There was a lot of like, Paul Naschy put out a bunch of exploitation films or whatever. His name isn't fucking Paul Naschy or whatever. It's a Spanish name. I don't remember what it is. It's like yeah, it's like Alfredo Molina or whatever. But it's like he called himself Paul Naschy to fucking put out like films that people would like check out because it wasn't coming from a Spanish name or whatever. It's like but he so like, I don't know, he, like, my dad had seen them in the 70s or whatever, like just, but he didn't the thing, we've always had like a kind of tough relationship, because of his growing up like that, and my grandfather being very hard or whatever. So it's like when I was younger, like we didn't always, it was more a lot like fighting and yelling at each other. But as I got older or whatever, talking with him, it's like he would bring that up. I'm like, how the fuck did you ever see a Paul Nash? Like it's like, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I saw him, like back then. I'm like, that's funny. It's like we never like really, our relationship is much better now. So, yeah, like stuff like that has come up that like I wouldn't have thought, but yeah, there's a lot of Spanish films that like, well, like the Tombs of the Blind Dead films or whatever, they're Spanish.
Man.
Yeah, like shit like that, which it's I love now as an adult or whatever. Or I mean, when I was younger too, I would check them out and be into it. But yeah, like there wasn't anything. I mean, there were certain things that he put me on to, like Deprisa, which is by, I want to say it's a fuck. I'm sorry, I don't remember who did it, but it's about it came out in like 79 or 80, and it's about like kids that that are poor, that have to like rob banks or whatever to basically, because I mean, after the dictatorship ended, I mean, even now Spain still has a lot of poverty, a lot of unemployment, a lot of like people that are struggling or whatever. But at that time, there was definitely a lot of people that didn't have any money or whatever. And so, you know, I mean, it's still like when you go, to me, it's still a million times safer than where I live or whatever. But it's like, but it's also, but there is still the like chance you might get pickpocketed or whatever, you know, in certain neighborhoods and shit. And that, you know, back then it was kind of like these kids, you know, like the movie's about kids who didn't have any money, didn't have any like prospects or whatever. So they're like, they decided to start robbing banks and shit. And so they're doing that. And it's an amazing movie, and I recommend it if you can see it.
What is this one called again?
It's called Deprisa, which means like faster, faster. And it's by I'm fucking I don't know why the fuck I'm forgetting its name.
It's like a horror movie, or is it
no,
more
it's
like
not. It's
like a drama?
no, yeah. Well, it's basically, it's kind of like because it's very raw. It's like very kind of low budget or whatever. So it's not a horror movie, but it is. I would say it's. I mean, kind of like a realistic view of the horror of like what's happening in society.
Right.
You know, because it was kind of like a lot spot that and actually a lot of the actors in it, because they didn't get actual professional actors to be in it. A lot of them died from drug overdoses, or you know, I mean, like not long after the film was made and shit, or got killed trying to rob someone. You know, I mean, it's like it was like a real thing. There was a selection of movies called Kinke, or you know, Kinke films or whatever. Like there's a few that kind of came out, and that doesn't fully fit into that, but it's kind of like adjacent. So I mean,
okay.
yeah, no, I'll text it to you, the title of the film, and I don't know if there's even like a US edition of it. There might be, but it you can get it in Spain or whatever. But yeah, no, but I mean, as far as like horror films, other than that, Paul Nash that he brought up, not really. Like, but I mean, there are like I said, the Tomb of the Blind Dead pieces, which I fucking love, which is amazing because it's so ridiculous.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like, to me, I'm into films like basically like all the 80s films that were filmed in Europe that had different actors from different countries, so they had to like dub some of the actors and not the other actors or whatever. Films like that are just like so over the top and just kind of like that is like, obviously, like we need to make money. Let's just put as much ridiculous shit as we can into it or whatever. Like that I love fucking pieces. And it actually took me a long time, because it's like I always remember seeing it at the video store, and it was like it looked super heavy, like from the box or whatever. Just like it looked like, oh, this is gonna be like too much or whatever. This is gonna be, and then when you fucking see it and you're like, this is so ridiculously like just like so like funny. Like it's just like it's so out of hand or whatever. It's So I think everyone needs to see that if they haven't seen it, you know. But, yeah.
It's funny, like, because when I was younger, I remember that was always like, I feel like anything that was outside of the US, anything that was, you know, like Italy or Japan, China, right. There was different things, you know, even, you know, anything that was even like from Mexico, that, you know, there was like an added kind of degree of like, oh man, this is going to be rough. And for whatever reason, like for a long time, like especially the 80s stuff. And I'm trying to think, because like you mentioned pieces, some of like the G.O.Y.L stuff that you have, you know, or like Argento's different things.
Yeah, or the Fulci movies.
The Fulci movies, you know, like just some of the things in like the Vibrant Red Blood, or like Demons, if you ever were into that movie.
Oh yeah,
like,
I fucking love Demons. Yeah, Demon. Well, and that's it. Like me and Jeff Jelen, who play guitar, and Charles Bronson and MK Ultra and Punch in the Face or whatever. When we started talking, we'd tell you like our love of fucked up films or whatever definitely like bonded us or whatever, where we became really fast friends on that or whatever. Yeah, because it's like he was super into like Italian gore movies and shit, and giallos and still is or whatever. But like, you know, we were always able, and like you know, we were both just trying to find like as much kind of just crazy movies as we could or whatever and watch them and shit, you know. So like, yeah, but we definitely like bonded on the Argento movies and the Fulci movies and fucking you know, like, yeah, like all that shit or whatever. So it's just, and you know, we both loved how absurd they were and like how they looked amazing and the gore was amazing, but it was just like it made like absolutely no sense or whatever. And then, you know, so I mean, I think like those movies are my favorites, you know, from when I was a kid and shit. But it's like just because it's like you can't. Well, if you try to replicate, it's I don't even know how like it's like someone could try to replicate it, but they can't fucking replicate it. It's just like I mean, it's the same. I guess it's the same with some hardcore stuff where it's like, oh, that's like what someone had available, and it's like it's super rough and crazy sounding. But it's like now someone wants to like, oh well, I'll put it through this fucking box or whatever and make it try and sound like that. It's just like it's not the same, man. It's like the same with horror movies or whatever. It's like this is what we had, like pieces that like like the Bruce Lee was fucking Li. Bruce Lee was visiting the set that day, and they're like, "Dude, we need to put you in the movie," or whatever. Like, and then had the scene where it's like he's doing karate just like out of nowhere and shit. Like you can't replicate. I mean, you can try to replicate it, but it's not like it's not gonna come across the same way. Yeah, well, I mean, it's just not like it's like I don't have the time, you know, like City of the Living Dead, like the ending makes no fucking sense. I don't know why, like it's just like it makes like literally like no, like I don't think they cut anything out to make it no, it just like doesn't make any sense. So it's just like fuck it, it's done, we're done, you know. And it's like you can try and replicate it like in a way, but it's like you're not going to be able to replicate it. Like it's you know.
And you know, like I even think of something where the original Suspiria. Have you seen the remake?
Yeah, I have. So.
And maybe this is kind of this isn't a popular opinion, but I actually liked the remake better than the original. I love the original. I think it's cool, but kind of like where you're saying, where I feel like there's certain times where there's a disconnect, maybe with myself, and maybe just things that are, you know, being portrayed or something that I'm just not quite, you know, like getting onto. I always thought I grew up with it. I thought it was cool. You know, I thought it was. I had a rad edition that came with a poster, this like felt case, and but that remake came out, and I was just like pretty enamored by it, and just the extreme like molding of the body when she was dancing. And
no, I thought I thought the remake was interesting. I don't like it better than the original one, just because I think I have more of an attachment to the original one. Also, the original one is more about like, again, it's not about the story making sense really. It's about feeling. It's the way it looks, everything like that. Whereas like the remake, I thought was interesting. And I didn't hate it. I know a lot of people do hate it, but it's you know, but on the same end, it's like I don't know. Like I could understand someone liking it better just because it in the sense of it is maybe a little bit more narratively together, and there's like more gore and, you know, shit like that or whatever with it. But I think overall, I just think it's again it's kind of like when you're doing something as a remake. There are remakes that I do like better than the original in certain cases, but I guess in that where it's just like Suspiria, the things that I think are the most interesting from the original, it didn't replicate that. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like its own new thing or whatever. So I mean, so I'll take it like that. So I thought it was interesting, but I didn't like it better. I'll just say that.
Okay.
You know.
Now, here's something, you know, where like I kind of brought up like boutique labels earlier. There's a company called Vinegar Syndrome. Are you familiar with them at all?
I think I've seen the name. I've been like, because I used to buy all like the DVDs and shit like that, and then I kind of like, you know, everything's on streaming or whatever, and I already have like also too. They tend to put out this like, oh, here's a new edition that has like some little other piece that's on it or whatever. Like, so I'm just I got to a point where I'm like, you know what? this new edition looks awesome or whatever, but I've got already one or two or whatever. Like I don't like need this other one. So
Yeah.
and like I know you're into collecting that and that's awesome or whatever. But I've gotten to a point where I'm kind of like, all right, I'm gonna if I can see it somewhere else, I don't need to spend the money on the newest edition of it. But so like all the newest companies that are putting shit out, like I've seen them and I've seen the name, but I can't say fully like, oh, they put this out or they put this out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, and, and kind of like you mentioned with that. So my collecting started with DVDs, and that's what I have the most of. And it's far and few between where I buy something on Blu-ray or 4K or I don't do a whole lot of like doubles. But what I was going to mention with the Vinegar Syndrome thing was they actually released a movie, I think it was last year, called Trauma. You ever remember that?
Trauma,
Argento?
Yeah, right. With Asia Argento. Yeah, no, I saw. Yeah, like back in whatever the '90s and shit. Yeah, like
never seen it.
Oh,
never.
right on.
And
this
is what I appreciate about those labels. Is like, you have things like that where I've never even heard of it. My wife bought it for me randomly. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. I've never heard of it, and watch it.
Yeah,
it's so sick.
Yeah, no, it's a cool movie. Like I think the thing is, it doesn't have the same. For people, probably doesn't have the same cachet as the 80s and 70s shit, like his earliest stuff. But I always liked it or whatever. Yeah, that I haven't watched it in a while, but I think it's good if they're putting shit out that like you can't find otherwise or whatever, because it's like if they do a new version of it, it's not just because. As much as I love Halloween, if they're gonna put, oh well, here's like the 50th box set of like everything, it's like that's cool, but I mean it's all nuts. But also I mean, and I get it, if they have a chance to fucking make money, they're gonna do it. And I mean really it's on it's on me to not buy it if I don't want to buy it. right. But I think it's good to if they can put out movies that like it's not like I think I have a Trauma DVD or whatever that came out a while ago and shit. But if they do a new version of it, because I don't think that's on streaming or whatever. It might be, but I could be wrong. But that's cool that they did that though.
It was sick. Yeah, and there's certainly other things too, like they do like a lot of action, they do a lot of like kind of like under the radar stuff, but still really really sick. I mean, like they do a great job. It was kind of funny when I first got one of the releases through Vinegar Syndrome. When I first got one of their releases, it came in and it was a Blu-ray, so I'm like, oh okay, they're gonna kind of restore it, and I pop it on, and it was like the worst version of a VHS ever.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing too. It's like it's hard to keep up with if they don't put any effort into making it look better and shit. Then it's like, am I gonna buy the 4K of fucking some movie that's like super grainy and shitty looking anyways or whatever? It's like if they're not gonna actually put any effort into it, because that's another thing too. Like another thing because my hearing is fucked because of playing drums for so long that if they don't put subtitles on it or whatever, that drives me insane too. Because there are certain things I'm like, fuck, like I can't like I mean, I'm in a situation where I've had my hearing or whatever, but think about all the people who don't have hearing or whatever, that they should be able to watch that shit too or whatever. And it's weird like how much they don't think about that sometimes or whatever. It's just like well fuck, we better get it out, like people someone's gonna pay some money for this or whatever. I don't know, but
no, I was gonna mention though, with it being as grainy, so they do like a restoration process for their disc to where like when you initially see it, you think like, oh, this is just they ripped it off from the original VHS. But when you actually like grow to like see more of them, you notice that if I were to watch the VHS, like this part's really dark, and I'm not gonna be able to see what's going on. Or this part's really, so it's kind of cool because they actually keep that original feel of like watching it on a small TV, maybe VHS or through a whatever. But they do a solid job too, and have some really cool artwork with it, and so there's some awesome. I'll have to send you a couple. Send you a couple of the labels, and
no,
hopefully you not get pissed at me for
Oh,
all
no.
the cool things you see.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's cool. Yeah, no,
Your
I'll check
wallet.
it out. I think too, I think what comes up now, or at least in terms of like how you kind of see, to go back to what we were saying, like say with the remake of Suspiria and shit like that, is that the way that we check movies out now or see it, it kind of like, when I was younger, it's like you would find this box with this crazy looking artwork or whatever, and then you watch it and you're like, oh shit, this is fucking kind of just like very bizarre, and like kind of like, especially with like Suspiria, it was like, this looks cool, this doesn't make any sense, it looks awesome or whatever. It's like, like something like that. Whereas like now it's like, oh, I'm just gonna stream this on Amazon or whatever. It's just like there's a little like, there's a disconnect in terms of like how you take something. And that's something that, like, I was watching or listening to a podcast that Damien from Fucked Up does, and he brought that up or whatever on something where he said that someone, they were talking about a newer movie like X or Pearl or whatever, like, and like saying like, watching it now is just like a different than like if I had found this on, like if I had got like the DVD. And I mean, again, this ties back to all this shit that we're talking about, the internet or whatever,
Yeah.
where it's like,
Yeah.
you know everything about fucking everything now. When you didn't know shit, that fucking that made it like street trash or whatever. You're watching it and just like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? Like, it's like, this is so like out of nowhere or whatever.
Toxic
And
Avenger.
yeah, like, yeah, shit like the Toxic Avenger. And now it's like, now you know every little intricacy of it or whatever, and it doesn't hit you the same way. So I mean, and again, that might be kind of like old man yelling at cloud kind of shit, but it's like, but I mean, there is something to be said for that or whatever. It's like, if you like find a movie that's like just super like creepy or depressing or whatever the fuck, then when you're watching that and you're like, if you got it at a video store and it's just like a cool drawing or whatever on it, or like or painting and like all this other shit, and you don't really know anything else about it or whatever, and you're watching, and just like that whole experience or whatever imprints something more on you, or at least with like related to horror. And like, I like newer horror movies or whatever, but yeah, I think that does affect you differently a little bit,
And a lot of the times, in my opportunities of like these interviews is bringing up things like cover art and or if it's film, the artwork to like to movies or posters. And I feel like I had more of that experience initially with movies and going to a rental shop or going to a small mom and pop, shop to buy like VHS or DVD was a really bigger thing. But that carried over, to music, very fast, where it was a hand in hand experience. But I think the movie aspect was, you might be having friends over for a weekend, or you might be going over somewhere and it's like, oh man, I have to impress with something. Like these guys, might know a couple of things. I need to, figure out if I can find some cool, random movie that nobody's heard of.
Yeah. I think that's something too with the internet, because everything is so fucking, you have access to everything that people are now trying to out obscure each other with music or with films or with whatever. It's like, oh, well, you think that's crazy, and then what about this film that someone made in their fucking backyard on a on a camcorder or whatever, that like only one person is, it's like, there is kind of like that going on too, which I'm into seeing shit that I haven't seen or whatever. It's cool, but on the same end, it is kind of like, you can kind of see, I think sometimes people's opinions get informed a little, like it's like a little bit too much from the internet, where it's like, all right, well, this person says this isn't this isn't great, so it's like, and like, so you like, we need to like this isn't obscure enough, you need to fucking check this out or whatever, and all, it's like too much kind of cult of personality shit related like with that too, and just like with either music or films or whatever. So man, it's just I don't know. It's kind of like, I don't even remember exactly what the original point of or like what the question you were asking, but
it's fun. I mean, just as far as just the interest in film and kind of in sharing that experience. It's been so fun,
Yeah.
just kind of free flowing with everything. And yeah, I mean, with all those experiences too, my phone is about to
Dude,
die. So
it's all
I want to be able
good.
to save
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
so
man.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I'll be in contact, man. If
Right
we'll
on.
do something, we'll have to maybe do like an actual film episode and
Right on.
introduce each other to something, and have something like that come in like the next couple of months. So
Cool.
let's do that, man.
All
That'd
right,
be
man.
awesome.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Bro,
Thanks
thank you
again.
so,
Thank you
so
so
much,
much for
brother.
having us. All right, man. Take care, man. See
Yeah.
you.
So lo-fi, lo-fi, a whole guy, yeah. Lo-fi horror guy has been recorded in front of a live studio audience.